Hello, how's everyone doing today? My guest today needs no introduction, so I won't give him one. Just kidding. He is often referred to as a pale carbon copy of Murray Rothbard, the great Walter Block. How are you doing today?
Pretty good, and I'm honored to be mentioned in the same sentence with Murray Rothbard.
So, a bunch of interesting topics I wanted to talk about today. The first topic, last time we had you on, you spoke about, you can't do interpersonal comparisons of utility. And the example you gave was, you can't, to say A is worse than B is an example of interpersonal comparisons of utility because worse is a value judgment. So you can't say that government makes things worse. You um, you can't say that government makes things better, and you can't, but you also can't say it makes things worse. Right? Is that a fair analysis so far?
Well, let me comment so far. First of all, you can say that A is better than B. I like vanilla ice cream better than chocolate ice cream, or vice versa. And that's an intrapersonal comparison utility, and I think that's valid. That's, what do you call it? Ordinal utility, not cardinal utility. So intrapersonally, I like vanilla better than chocolate, but I can't be I can be ordering, but I can't be cardinal even interpersonally, intrapersonally. Namely, I can't say I like vanilla at the rate of 10 utils and I like chocolate at the rate of 5 utils, and therefore I like vanilla twice as much as chocolate. That would be invalid because there are no units or utils, units of utility. Okay, now let's move to interpersonally. If we have a trade, and I trade you this cough drop here for your pen, let's say your pen over here, and I have a pen and a cough drop. You're going to give me the pen, and I'm going to give you the cough drop. I think we can say that I like the pen more than that I'm getting, more than the cough drop that I'm giving up, and you like the cough drop that you're getting more than the pen that you're giving up. But again, that's sort of intrapersonally, your taste and my taste. Now, with regard to, what do you call it, interpersonally ordinal, I can't say that I like vanilla ice cream more than you like vanilla ice cream. And I certainly can't say that I like vanilla ice cream at 10 utils and you like it at 5. And therefore, I like vanilla ice cream twice as much as you do. All that is invalid. Okay, so now let's get to government. We can say that government cannot make people better off. Wait, which way? We can't say that government makes people better off because every action that government undertakes takes stuff away from Peter and gives to Paul. So Peter loses out, Paul gains. And since there are no interpersonal comparisons of utility, we can't say that. On the other hand, there are some people. I think Brian, what's your teacher's name? Brian Kaplan. I think it's him. Says that Rothbard and me, and I'm just a pale carbon copy of Murray, but I agree with him on this. The Rothbardians are wimpy and wussy, and I'm putting words into Brian's mouth, but I think I'm being accurate here. You say it now.
Well, I think my follow-ups to another question, but pretty much to say, you could say I prefer, A over B, but to say A is worse than B as an objective statement is doing interpersonal comparisons of utility, because some might think A is worse and some might think it's better. So how can you objectively say A is worse than B, right?
Okay, fair enough. But with regard to government, see, what Murray wants to say is you can't prove that government does any good. You can prove that government does. Now, can you prove that government does bad? Well, no, because the government helps some people and hurts other people, and you can't weigh the differences. You can just prove that it can't do any good for everybody, because at least one person is going to be harmed by government activity, the victim of government activity.
Right. Okay. So my follow-up question is, if you can't do interpersonal comparisons of utility, right? So for example, to me, this is a sentence that Rothbard wrote, which to me is an example of him doing interpersonal comparisons of utility right now. It's in his article, War, Peace, and the State. and he says, such crimes against another person as enslavement and murder are surely far worse than theft. Says who? Why is murder and enslavement far worse than theft if we can't do interpersonal comparisons of utility? Isn't there a person who would say, I would rather you steal my life than steal my car because I care more about my family having my possessions in the future than I value my own life? This to me seems like an example of doing interpersonal comparisons of utility.
Well, I think you're right, but I think you're not sympathetically enough reading that. See, if Murray was speaking as a praxeologist, you're absolutely right. And I don't think Murray would say that in the first place for the reasons that you've just given. On the other hand, Murray sometimes speaks as a historian, as in the view that most people would view it this way. And there he's absolutely right. And surely we all agree that most people, virtually everyone, would value their life more than a car. But you see, he's talking here more as a philosopher of crime, and he's trying to come up with, I don't know, punishment theory. Look, you see, the problem with punishment theory is, you know, you're a weakling, so if I just sort of touch you a little bit, here I touch you, that's assault and battery, and it's going to really hurt you. On the other hand, if I punch Arnold Schwarzenegger as hard as I can right in the nose, he just sort of laughs. So you, as a praxeologist, you can't make these interpersonal comparisons of utility. Maybe I really hurt Arnold more than I hurt you. He's just covering it up with laughter. But if we're going to, punish people for crimes, and in the one case, I punch somebody in the nose as hard as I can, and the other time I just sort of touch them gently on the shoulder, you'd have to say, from a criminological point of view, that the former is a worse crime than the latter. Not from a praxeological point of view. There I agree with you. You can't say these things. But
that involves doing interpersonal comparisons of utility, right? To say that there should be a harsher punishment for murder than for theft is engaging in interpersonal comparisons of utility by saying that people are made worse off as a result of murder than theft.
I agree with you, but I think you're being too rough. I mean, I don't see any flaw in your argument, but I think what you're doing in philosophy, they call it a category mistake, where you're taking something from one universe of discourse, criminology, and you're putting into that something from an entirely different universe of discourse, namely praxeology, and you're conflating the two. Look, let's forget about praxeology for the moment, although we're both Austrian economists, we're not going to forget about it forever, but just for the moment, we want to set up some sort of rules of punishment, and I think it's reasonable to say that if you're a murderer, you're going to get punished more than if you steal bubble gum. And yet, now we bring in praxeology, and, you know, this bubblegum might be, I worship this bubblegum piece. It's, you know, so wonderful. I'd give my life to protect it. You know, you can come up with all sorts of stories. But if you do that, then what happens to any coherent sense of punishment theory? We libertarians, see, libertarianism and Austrian economics are two different universes of discourse. And I agree, it's interesting to conflate them or to bring them together, but there's also a case for keeping them separate, because we want to have a coherent legal system, and if you apply Austrian economics as strictly as you are, we can't have one. All we can say is, I don't know what we can say. Bob Wenzel is now saying that each person should decide the punishment for himself on subjectivist grounds that you're talking about.
Well, then everyone would just imply the harshest punishment possible, and that would be completely incompatible, I think, with any proportional punishment.
Well, yeah, but so would proportional punishment be inconsistent with praxeology.
I agree. That's doing interpersonal comparisons of utility.
Right, but I don't know. It's sort
I'm
of
not
like
against making interpersonal comparisons of utility, right? I'm sort of on the other side. I agree with Hummel and Kaplan. I think it's okay to make them. I don't think you can be accurate, and because you can never know what's in someone's head, but I think we make them all the time, and I don't think there's anything wrong with doing it.
Well, you see, look, let's take another word. Take the word indifference. No. Take the word work.
Okay.
in physics, work means moving a certain mass through a certain distance, right? And if I hold my arms out like this with a 10-pound barbell on each side, I'm not doing any work in the physics sense, right? Because I'm still, although my arms are going to start drooping in about a minute, because holding even 10-pound barbells like this is very, very hard. And I'm not that strong, but I'll bet you even Mike Tyson, after 5 minutes, his arms are going to droop, because it's very hard to hold out your arms like that. But let's say he's holding them out steady. Is he doing any work? No, not in the physics sense. But the sweat is pouring off his brow, and he's breathing heavy, and he's just sweating all over the place. So in the physics sense, he's not doing any work, but in the ordinary language sense, he is working very, very hard. Okay, now, I have 2 kids, a boy and a girl, and the boy likes vanilla ice cream and the girl likes chocolate ice cream. So I give the boy, my son, vanilla ice cream, and I give my daughter chocolate ice cream. I'm making interpersonal comparison utility, but I'm doing it not as a praxeologist. I'm doing it as an ordinary language speaker. You hate pickles. I love pickles. So somebody, if there's only so many pickles, they shouldn't give you any. They should give me all the pickles, and the opposite for mustard or whatever it is. In other words, in ordinary language, look, I don't want you to get perverted by those Austrians at Mason. I've got to get you back into the fold here. So in ordinary language, although it might not be so bad to get perverted by them for a while until you pass their courses, then you can change. Well, that's a whole other issue. But we're out after the truth here. We're not out after maximizing the chances of you getting a PhD. But those guys are pretty good. They're not going to hold it against you if you disagree with them. I think they're excellent in that way. Although there are some professors that aren't excellent in that way. Okay.
I was told to kiss ass, but whatever. Okay, go ahead.
Well, kissing ass is never a bad suggestion, but I think that those guys are nice enough and have enough honor such that if you were a good student and you disagree with them, they wouldn't hold it against you. I don't do that with my students. I wouldn't imagine that they would do that with their students. So so the point I'm trying to make is there are different contexts, and you have to be sensitive to the context. In ordinary language, the pickles, you like them, I don't like them, or whatever it is. And we make in ordinary language, we make interpersonal comparison utility all the time. But as a matter of technical economics, the indifference curve is crazy. There is no such thing as indifference. I had this argument with Brian Kaplan about indifference. I say that in ordinary language, if I hold out two cans of Coke and I say, which one do you want? And you say, oh, I don't care. Just give me one of them. I'll say, fine, you're indifferent. But as a matter of technical economics, when Brian Kaplan reaches into his drawer and gets a green sweater or a blue sweater, he gets the green sweater. So I deduce that he preferred the green sweater more than the blue sweater. Maybe it was more convenient. Who knows where it was? Or if you grab one can of Coke rather than the other, I say you weren't indifferent because you demonstrated a preference for the one over the other. So in one sense, yes, you are indifferent. But in another sense, you're not, because you picked this can of Coke. Why'd you pick this can if you were so indifferent?
Right. Okay. But then can't people respond, well, if you say I can't do interpersonal comparisons of utility in economics, but in the real world I can, then what good is it in economics? How is it applicable in the real life if apparently there are all these exceptions that...
Well, I get back to the physics and the concept of work. We have a technical language, and what we mean by preference is different than what the ordinary people mean by it. Just as in physics, they mean something different by work. So it's really a a verbal dispute.
Sure.
We're not really disputing. Well, I was going to say we're not really disputing anything of substance, but Brian Kaplan and I are disputing something of substance, because he's saying there shouldn't be any difference between technical language and ordinary language. It should all be the same. And I say, well, no. Why can't we have a technical language? The physicists have it, and you neoclassicists have physics envy all over the place. So why shouldn't we envy the physicists in this sense? Ha ha.
All right. Fair enough. Anyway, I want to get on some interesting topics. So I want to talk about crime and punishment. I have my own view, and it's controversial, although I don't think it should be. And my own view is if you're not old enough to consent, you're not old enough to be punished, right? Meaning it's inconsistent to say, well, if you can't consent to something at the age of 15, you should be punished for something you apparently can't consent to. So I guess, your response on that thoughts, and I guess when it comes to like for example, there was a case I read where there was a brother and sister. The brother was 8 years old and the sister was 6 years old, and they raped another 8-year-old girl. The sister would block the door, and the 8-year-old boy proceeded to rape the 8-year-old girl. And when I read the story, my view was they should not be punished. The parents should, because at the age of 8 and 6, you're responsible for your kids, and this is a result of bad parenting, not as a result of you shouldn't be, just like we don't punish, we wouldn't throw a baby in jail for murder. I think at that age, the parents are responsible. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I don't really disagree with you. I'm sorry to say, because if I disagreed, we'd have a more interesting discussion. I mean, there are limits. There's a continuum. You know about the continuum problem that, that if you go to bed with a 5-year-old girl, you're a statutory rapist, even if she agrees, because she's not capable of consenting. On the other hand, if you go to bed with a 25-year-old woman, she is capable of consenting, and you're not a rapist. Well, what about 15, 14, 16? Where do you draw the line? So I'm not saying 8 or 6, although I think 6 and 8 is way too young to be punished. On the other hand, I don't know that you'd want to punish the parents either, because sometimes parents can't really control kids. They're not with them 24/7. So it's a real tough issue. Look, the issue of children and punishment is a very, very tough issue, not just for libertarians, but for everybody. Right. It's part of this continuum problem. Children are rights-bearing, but not really fully responsible. They're a little bit responsible, and maybe you could have a lesser punishment. Now, look, for an ordinary rape, an 18-year-old boy rapes an 18-year-old girl, we throw the book at him. Mm-hmm. An 8-year-old boy rapes an 8-year-old girl, we throw half the book at him softly. A 3-year-old boy rapes a 3-year-old girl, which can happen. Mm-hmm. We throw a little page of the book at him. I mean, a 3-year-old is, 8-year-olds are more responsible than 3-year-olds, and it should be sort of proportional. I mean, you really can't punish well, my grandchildren are now 1 year old. Mm-hmm. And they're forever grabbing hair and pulling, like with my daughter-in-law, they pull her hair. They once, when I had a longer beard, they pulled my beard. They really hurt me, but they were like 6 months old. What do you do? Punish a 6-month-old for grabbing hair and pulling? Mm-hmm. And they're twin boys, so they grab each other. They grab each other's ears and they pull, and the parents and the grandparents just sort of separate them. You can't punish a 6-month-old baby. I mean, that's crazy. You can maybe punish a 3-year-old a little bit. An 8-year-old you can punish more, a 12-year-old even more. And, so I think there's some sort of continuum here, some sort of proportionality. The more the child is older, the more you can punish him or her. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, like one of the things that happens in the crazy real world is, they have juvenile detention for children, but if the juvenile commits a heinous crime, then he's treated as an adult and gets punished as an adult. And to me, that's crazy. Why, if he now commits murder, he should be treated as an adult, but if he steals, he should go to the juvenile thing? I mean,
well, I think you have two dimensions here. One dimension is the age, and the other dimension is the severity. In other words, I'm sort of a moderate here. That's why they call me Walter Moderate Block. Right. I think that, there was a case of 2 8-year-olds killed a 3-year-old boy. Mm-hmm. And I think they should be treated more harshly than 2 8-year-old boys who raped a 3-year-old boy, or 2 8-year-old boys who took the toys or the candy away from the 3-year-old boy. Mm-hmm. So I think you have to operate on two dimensions. And I'm not really, it hurts me to say this, but I'm not really a bitter opponent of government here. When the government has lesser crimes for younger people, and if the crime is very, very serious, then they treat them a little bit more harshly.
No, they treat them as an adult. They say you're technically 16, but now we're going to make it where you're 18 and punish you fully like an adult. I'm not
Well,
saying that.
you know, I wear glasses. I don't know if you can see them, but they have bifocals. And what bifocals are, they have a little window down at the bottom of them, and then they have a big screen. Some eyeglasses are they're bifocals, but they have a gradual thing in them, such that as you look up, it's more like this part, and as you look down, it's more like reading glass.
Mhm.
I agree with you that, see, what you're saying is it's an all or none thing. And I agree, it shouldn't be all or none. You shouldn't say you're 12 years old, but we're treating you as an adult because it was very serious. But I'm more of a continuum, sort of like those other eyeglasses, where as it gets more serious, the penalty gets more severe. As you get older, the penalty gets more severe. And as both occur, the penalty gets more severe at a quicker rate. But I agree with you that it shouldn't be an all or none thing. So let's say a 13-year-old commits murder. You shouldn't treat him as an adult, but maybe you should treat him as a 16-year-old, even though he's only 13, or as a 15-year-old, because 15-year-old is more severe penalty than 13-year-old. But a 13-year-old who commits a really heinous crime should be treated like an extra year or 2 or 3, but not like an adult. On the other hand, a 17-year-old, you know, who commits a heinous crime should be considered an adult. So I agree with you that it shouldn't be an all or none thing. Do you agree with me that it should be a gradually increasing thing, both on severity and on age?
Yes, I would.
Okay, so we agree.
Damn it.
Sorry to say.
All right. So I asked a friend. He has 2 questions he wanted me to ask you. They're a bit long, but I'll try to read them quickly. First question is, in a free society, we can objectively cap the limit on property rights violations at twice the rights violation plus arbitration expenses. The cap is based on 2 parts, the restitution part and the punishment part. Is the punishment part only just in those circumstances when the rights violation was intentional? And if so, who decides when the rights violation was intentional? Possibilities seem to be the victim or the arbitrator, but there does not seem to be an objective one-size-fits-all way to decide this. Who has the best claim to determine if intentionality, and if successfully appealed, would the extra punishment or reward not constitute a potential rights violation itself?
Wow, that's a lot. What you should have done is emailed me that, because it's hard for me to do justice to it. And if I don't do justice to it, we'll be on in another month or so.
Okay.
Email me long questions like that so I can be better prepared. So let me just sort of BS about that. Yes, intentionality is very important, because if it's an accident, it's not a crime. It's just a tort.
Right.
If I hit your car by accident, I only owe you 1 tooth. Namely, I got to make your car whole. But if I purposely rammed into your car with my car, that's heinous. I mean, that's very, very bad. And I would say that the libertarian view there would be, 1, I have to make good your car. 2, I have to give you my car. 3, if I immediately confess, then there are no costs of capture, so you don't have to pay for that. But if I hid, then I made it even worse. And 4, I have to play Russian roulette. Because when I purposely hit your car, I scared the hell out of you. I don't care if you're Arnold Schwarzenegger, which is a whole other problem, because Arnold is brave and you're a coward compared to Arnold. And but let's forget about that subjective stuff. I have to scare you. Or rather, you have to scare me, because I was the bad guy here. Mm-hmm. And how are you going to scare me? By going like this, boo? No, the way to scare me is Russian roulette or something like that, where the number of chambers and number of bullets is proportional to how bad the scaring was. So if it was burglary, where you came to my house with no weapons, it's lesser than if it was robbery, where you came with a weapon. And we've discussed, the subjectivism of that, but I insist that we can't bring in praxeology here. So I think that if it's purposeful, it's way worse than if it's an accident. Secondly, who has to determine this? Well, I don't know who else but the court. That's why we have courts. I mean, you can't deduce everything from the non-aggression principle of libertarianism. There are gray areas, there are continuums. You need a reasonable man kind of court. I am sometimes a little involved in studying the Talmud, which is the Jewish laws. And half of the Talmud, I don't know about half, but part of the Talmud is trying to figure out who the bad guy is. And you remember the baby cutting the baby in half business?
Yeah.
That was an attempt to find out who the false mother was. Half of it is trying to find out who the bad guy was, and half of it is trying to find out what is the proper law. Like, should you eat pork if you're starving? That sort of a thing. I'm not that interested in finding out. I'm not that interested in being a detective. I'm more interested in being a meta legal theorist, namely, what should the law be? But my answer is, if my usual assumption, the can opener joke with the economist, assume guilt or assume innocent. And now what happens? As to finding out, is the guy guilty or not? Well, that's why we have courts. The courts and the jury system. I mean, again, I'm sounding like a statist. I love the government here, but I don't see any better way of solving these things than with judges and juries, and all private, of course. But that would be the way of finding out whether it's purposeful or not. Now, sometimes you can't tell, in which case the burden of proof is on the plaintiff. The defendant is innocent until proven guilty. So the burden of proof would be on you, who now accuses me of purposefully ramming your car. You'd have to prove it. You'd have to give some evidence like, well, Walter was saying bad things about Daniel, and Walter has a habit of ramming people's cars and stuff like that. And then the judge would have to decide. So that would be my answer to your friend's question.
Talking about cutting the baby in half, that joke about the two mother-in-laws, each claiming that the guy is the husband?
No, go ahead.
Two mother-in-laws say, you married my daughter. The other one says, you married my daughter. They take it to the court, and the court says, okay, we're gonna cut the guy in half and give each half. So one says, no, I would rather you, the other woman, get it than cut in half. And the other one goes, cut him in half. And the judge goes, that's your mother-in-law.
That's great. Sort of a takeoff on the cutting the baby.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
All right. So the second question is...
Hold on just 1 second. What's up?
Yeah.
Leo, what's up? Aren't you going to that meeting, the Senate meeting? It's on right now. I'm going to go soon. You're not going.
I don't want to vote.
Okay, good. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So you've spoken about before about Viking justice, where people who commit crimes, you have battery for battery, and people who commit murder get murdered, and you have rape for rape. So the question is specifically regarding rape. Does that mean under the division of labor and specialization, even rapists can make a living by raping only convicted rapists if they were good enough at it?
Say that again.
Could you have a job in a libertarian society where your job was specifically to rape rapists? Yes.
Well, the way I see raping rapists, it's not so much with a penis, it's more like with a broomstick. And a splintered one for horrible rapes. I mean, raping rapists, that's interesting.
People who rape can make a living. They can.
Right. It's sort of like being an executioner, only instead of executing, you rape.
Right.
But you only rape convicted rapists.
Right.
Boy, you've got a weird mind.
This is Walter Block telling me I have a weird mind. Wow.
No, we're on the same.
This isn't actually even my question, but it's an interesting one.
No,
Yeah.
it's a very, very good question.
In a free society, rapists would find work.
Yes, that's right. It's sort of like voluntary slavery. We could have slavery if people agreed to it and all. And I suppose you don't have to do it with a broomstick, although whenever I think of punishing rapists, it's more broomstickish than penis. But I suppose, maybe there's room for rapists too. I love it. In my Defending 3, I'm going to have a chapter on the rapist who only rapes other rapists.
Good, we've inspired you.
No, he's not really a rapist, because the only way you can be a rapist is to rape innocent people. He's not a rapist. He's a quasi-rapist, right? Isn't that right?
Well, I get. Well, no, I isn't rape. Well, can you? No, I think rape is having sex with someone without consent.
No, I think it's having sex without consent of an innocent person. But I mean, the whole issue didn't arise until you and your weirdo friends came up with this. But I don't think that. Look, the executioner who executes a murderer, and we stipulate that the guy is a murderer. He's not an innocent person. He's not a murderer. He's an executioner. So we need a new word. And I just came up with quasi-rapist.
Right.
But he's not a rapist, because to be a rapist, you have to rape innocent people. If he's raping guilty people, and the court said that the penalty for this guy is to be raped, or this girl or gal is to be raped, and you rape her or him, you are not a rapist. You are a part of the law. You're acting legally. Whereas rape is per se illegal under the Libertarian Code, because you're trespassing on innocent people's bodies. But this guy is not an innocent person. He's a rapist. So if you rape him or her, I guess women can rape too. Let's not go there. You're not a rapist. You're a quasi-rapist, or you're whatever is to rape as executioner is to murderer.
Right. So, my view, and I'm curious what your view is. I mean, from a personal perspective, outside of libertarianism, personally, I don't really believe in punishment. I believe in restitution. My own view is about making the victim whole. It's not about making the aggressor suffer. I think that's sort of a petty and sort of reducing yourself to the, to a similar status. So from a personal level, I think restitution is more consistent with justice than punishment. But my view is if you have the death penalty, and it turns out the guy is innocent, then the people who executed them are guilty of committing murder, and they should face the same punishment that you would give to them. Not, whoops, it was a mistake, we didn't know. You're guilty of murder, and therefore I think you'd have very few death penalties, because people are not going to want to risk the chance unless they're pretty much 100% sure this guy actually did it, if they knew they would suffer this consequence being wrong.
I hate to agree with you so much, but I agree with you on both points. I agree that the executioner who executes an innocent person is a murderer. Can't say it more clear than that. And I also agree with you that we should not have punishment. We should only have restitution. However, the way I interpret restitution, a lot of people are going to think it's punishment, because the two teeth for a tooth theory plus scaring. The scaring is crucial. Look, you were a robber. You came to my house with a gun. You pointed the gun at me, and you took my money. You have to give me back the money. You have to give me an equal amount of money that you stole from me. And if you turn yourself into the police right away, there are no costs of capture. But then you scared me. What are we going to do about you, you rotten person, for scaring me? We got to scare you. How are we going to scare you? I think Russian roulette is a good way to scare you. And some people might regard this as punishment. Now, with regard to Russian roulette, you now owe me a trigger pull with 5 bullets and 100 chambers, 5% of death. And now you can bargain your way out of this. You can say, look, Walter, I owe you 1 pull of the trigger with a 5% chance of death. However, if you let me out of this, I'll give you $1 million. This would solve the Bill Gates problem. Bill Gates, I don't mean anything personal about Bill Gates, but a rich guy, I don't know, one of the Koch brothers.
Probably more realistic.
I'm sorry?
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump, any rich person now goes and steals a car. And if all we have is restitution, when we capture Donald, he'll restitute. He's got plenty of money. And if we don't capture him, he's scot-free. We got to do more than that. We got to stop Donald from stealing cars. Now, again, I'm not accusing Donald of stealing cars. We don't want to punish him. I'm getting a feedback all of a sudden.
No, you're doing fine.
No, I'm getting a feedback.
Really?
Every time I speak, I can hear myself 1 second later, and it's very annoying. Did you do something in the last minute?
No. Maybe the New York Times.
I don't know what to say, but I can't do the interview like this.
Hold on.
Because every time I say something, I hear it 1 second later.
You hear it again still?
Yeah. Hello?
You could try to come back in again. That'll just take about a 30 seconds, but yeah, I'm not
Okay.
sure
Well,
how that is.
If we can't solve it in any other way, look, I'll tell you what. Let's end here because I have something I really want to do. But in another month, we'll continue. We've
All right.
gone 40 minutes.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right.
Take care. Did you meet John Lingenfelter yet?
No, not in person.
Okay, well, you might enjoy meeting him. He's very similar to you. He's always bugging me with weird questions. You have a lot in common.
I don't know if I want to meet someone similar to me, but I'll see.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Send me the URL.
Yep, I will do this right now.